A purpose is a very subjective experience. And so the purpose for me is, what is the carrot that gets you out of bed? What is it that if you had magic fairy dust, you could spend the rest of life doing it and never quite being fulfilled?
Jennifer K. Hill is an entrepreneur, executive coach, and founder of the Jen Hill Tribe, a global community of entrepreneurs and thought leaders centered on connection, contribution, and purpose. After unexpectedly building and selling her first company through an unsolicited acquisition, Jennifer discovered that the exit wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning of a deeper one. Known as the fairy godmother of connection, she helps leaders align who they are with how they build and lead. In this conversation, we explore life after the exit, identity beyond titles, and what real fulfillment actually looks like.
And everybody's different. And it starts with a vision. What's your vision? If you could do anything, and it doesn't have to be big or small, it's whatever matters to you. And that, for me, Jerome, is a really great catalyst and flashlight to guide you to what your purpose is.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Your N.E.X.T. I'm your host, Jerome. We're on the other side of the pond today. Although she's from the U.S., Jennifer Hill has decided to hang out with me today and share a little bit about her journey to her next. Jennifer, how are you?
I am so good, Jerome. And as I'm listening to your voice, I'm just thinking I want you to sing lullabies on Insight Timer so I can listen to it and have your beautiful voice lull me to sleep.
She said I would put her to sleep, guys.
Oh no, I meant it as a compliment. I just thought your
Oh
voice is just so soothing and melodic.
I'm kidding. So, I like to open these with a very simple question. So, you had an exit.
Yeah, it was as surprising to me as to anybody. I never thought I would build a company, let alone sell a company, and that's exactly what happened. I didn't know my head from my ass, and somehow or another, a company approached me out of the blue to buy the company because we had built a really good reputation in the legal world, which was the first company I sold. And I guess it's all being the right place, right time, and right people. It actually came through a friend of a friend, and that's why a lot of my work now, Jerome, is helping people to make the right aligned connections. I find that having the right connection at the right time can help you exit a company, can help you hit greater levels of fulfillment and purpose in your life. And that's why I lovingly call myself, and friends call me, the fairy godmother of connection nowadays.
The fairy godmother of connection. So, this is wild because I think most people dream of your experience. They dream that somebody's going to approach them, offer them a life-changing amount of money, and then they're just able to ride off into the sunset. Most people think they can just sit on the beach for the rest of their life in retirement, and then they actually get there and they start questioning the decision to sell. But you did something that very, very, very few people do. I mean, 2 out of 10 businesses that get listed sell. So the fact that you got an unsolicited offer is something that's pretty magical. What was so interesting about your company that made people or a company reach out and offer to buy it?
Well, it's funny because this actually ties into the asset purchase agreement. And one of the clauses of the agreement, I couldn't even use my own name. So I just built a really good reputation around our brand. The company was even tied into my name because it was a joke. When I first opened the company, I kind of opened it as more than a gag than anything else in 2010. And so never did I ever think it was called J Hill Staffing. It was legal recruiting. And because it was our brand had become so strong in the legal industry, across the US, I was doing speaking, white papers, everything. I think that just kind of created this magnetic attraction. And we had a very systematized way, Jerome, that we would match people with the right employer that was unprecedented. So if anybody's listening and you've ever built a team or a company, you know that hiring is one of the greatest pain points for most companies. And because I'm autistic and was able to see patterns where other people couldn't, I could actually predict with a high degree of certainty who was going to match well with whom and lead to really high retention and sustainability. So I think it was part of just being of service. I also want to add, the spiritual side, because you and I have talked about that, Jerome, is I think that when you're somebody who shares and where you give, that was a big part of the company. Part of what made us differentiated as well is 10% of our proceeds after, though it's funny, I'm laughing as I say this, 10% of our proceeds after costs went to charity. So we used that to build a couple schools in Senegal and Nepal. But I'm laughing because I was so naive and ignorant in business when I first started, Jerome, that the first 2 years I was in business, I was doing 10% of profits before cost. Like sending it to charity. So I literally had never read a business book in my life. My best friend had gifted me when I opened my first company, How to Build a Small Business for Dummies, little yellow book. And that was my foray into understanding business. So I definitely had to learn as I was building the company.
That's wild. I just watch so many people struggle through it. And I think the listeners would say, oh, well, it was just easy for her. She didn't have the training. She didn't know she's the bumblebee, right? She didn't know that she wasn't supposed to fly.
I love that analogy.
Would you feel like that's a fair characterization of how this happened?
Yes, and I have to, as we're talking about this, I'm very intuitive and I get, thoughts and wisdom from my higher self as we speak. And one of the things I want to give credit to is my ex-husband. He really was a catalyst for this because, in all honesty, my first company was a complete failure. So imagine this, Jerome. Here I am. I work for a corporation in the legal field for about 5 years and I break every record they have. I make tons of money. They make millions and millions of dollars off of it. It all goes swimmingly. Well, I think I'm so smart and clever that I can just go make millions of dollars and quit my six-figure a year job and go build a company. So my first company that I think I built it in 2008, was an epic failure. Like the year before, I made almost $200,000. The next year, I made $5,000 because I had no business plan, no strategy. And really, kudos goes to my ex husband because after I went back to work for a brief period as a partner in another company, it wasn't aligned. And after I left them, my ex husband at the time we were still together said, look at you. You have more clients than you know what to do with. Why don't you just go build your own company? And I was like, wow. So if he hadn't really spawned me to do that, I would have never built the first company and exited it. So kudos to him because he was very business savvy and inspired me to do it.
Wow. I think very few people actually give credit to the spouse. And so nice. I think it's amazing that you chose to do that there. You used a word, though, that really raised my eyebrow. You said it wasn't aligned. What does that mean to you?
So, part of the work I do now, Jerome, in helping humanity, and my dream is that every human being has a deep connection to themselves, others, and their purpose, or what I call the golden triangle of connection. And where alignment comes in is so often we're not connected to ourselves. We don't know our values. We don't know what motivates us. And we wind up being like a pinball in a machine, and we bounce to one company and bounce to another company and to another relationship or friendship, but we're not paying attention to where the alignment is. And when we deeply connect intimately to ourselves, to understand our own motivations, to understand what drives us, that then gives us capacity to understand others' motivations, to understand whether or not our values are aligned, our motivations, our purpose. And once we have a deep sense of knowing, that then allows us to find alignment with our purpose. But imagine your purpose might be like a squirrel. You're trying to chase around a park with a nut and offer it a nut. That's us like running after this opportunity or that opportunity. Yet in reality, we can just sit there calmly and wait for the squirrel to come to us when we're clear on our vision. We can just hold our open palm out with the nuts, being whatever we're motivated by, our bigger vision, purpose, and then the right resources come to you. And really, that's what happened when I exited my last company, was just being in perfect alignment with knowing who I was and what I was committed to in the world. And the squirrel came to me. I've never used that analogy before. I have no idea. I think it came because my husband's invested in a company and working with a company where he was talking about the call names or something that they use in the Navy and Air Force. And my husband and I were joking earlier. He said, I said, oh, I have your call name. Your call name would be Squirrel because my husband's always like here and there and forgetting what he's doing. And he said mine would be Sparkle Toes. So that's my new call name apparently is Sparkle Toes and his is Squirrel.
Those nicknames are endearing, but they also have a truth that most people like they're uncomfortable with. It's like a little prod, but all in love. It's the Navy's always like family. So I don't think it was just there. I think we're connected. So one of my kids and I's favorite things to do when they were small was to go to the park and take peanuts and
What?
then pull them out. And while the squirrels never got comfortable enough to come up and take them out of our hands, they would come over to us and we'd throw them to them. And it would be cool to see them like grab them and take them up the tree and then eat them from a safe place. So
That's
that's a really
wild,
cool
Jerome.
memory.
I have to tell you the funniest thing. I had had actual squirrels come up and eat them out of my hands. If you ever go to St. James Park in London, they're quite aggressive, those squirrels. They'll straight up crawl up your leg and go for it. But I had the funniest thing happen. So in 2019, I was invited to co-moderate a panel with Deepak Chopra and Don Hoffman. And I had never read a book by Deepak Chopra in my life. So I think his book at the time that I was going to interview him on was called Total Meditation. So I'm sitting in Senegal by a beach reading his book while I'm getting ready to go build my second school with my dad in Senegal. And it's right before we're about to go to the village. And so I'm trying to study up on Deepak's book. And I remember I read a line in Deepak's book, Jerome, where he said, a woman walked up to him at a conference and said, I want to show you something. And intrigued, Deepak's like, okay. She said, you have to come outside with me. So she guides Deepak outside. They sit on the bench, and this woman has wild birds come and sit on her. And Deepak's like, how are you doing this? And she says, I have bird consciousness. So that became my obsession, Jerome. I was like, oh my God, life goal. I want to have random wild birds land on me. So fast forward a few months later, I wound up moving to London. And I used to love to go to St. James Park. There's a fig tree at the edge of a bridge where I met a woman one day who would hold out figs, and these little green parakeets would come and eat figs from her out of her hand. So I remember sitting there for hours sometimes until wild green parakeets started landing on me, and it was the most exhilarating thing. But then it got even better because these parakeets had become a little bit domesticated. And then I thought, well, I'd like to have real wild birds, like ones that don't normally eat out of people's hands. So I remember I had this itty bitty little blue tit come and one day grab some seeds out of my hand, and then a big brown bird came and landed on my arm. So it's funny because I'm tying this back into the business for a reason. I think that when we have certainty beyond logic, certainty about selling your company, certainty about your purpose and your vision, certainty about knowing wild birds will land on you, sometimes even just knowing that another woman had done it made it possible for me to stand there and with perfect certainty know that complete wild birds would come and land and eat out of my hand, literally and figuratively, right? And I think it's a beautiful metaphor for business because unless we can cultivate that level of certainty and sometimes even see somebody else has done it before, it's from that place that all of a sudden magic and miracles can unfold in our business.
This is awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'll go on and say it's awe inspiring. I watch so many people get into the desert and then question whether or not they can make it across to paradise, right? And
Mm.
so they turn around and then they go back to the thing. And you described this early in your journey. It's like, hey, my first company didn't work. And so I went back and started working for somebody else, but it wasn't aligned. And so you went back out into the desert and you crossed the desert and you got to an oasis and you took a break, you got some water, and then you continued on that journey. Did you do that without any guidance? Like, were you able to make that journey through without anybody helping you along the way?
Well, here's something embarrassing, and I'm literally blushing. I don't know if people will be able to see the video, but so this is why I have a book coming out next year called The Recovering Asshole. At the time I was building that first company, my head was so far up my ass. I have no idea how I accomplished anything because I was completely uncoachable. I take it back. I did start doing a little bit of personal development work, but I was still anti-coaching, anti-mentors. I wasn't very open and receptive. And it's actually my late co-founder who just passed away, Julian Adler, who was my first business coach. And I will always remember, so this was a few years, like probably 2 or 3 years into building my first company, the second one, the one that was successful and exited. And I remember Julie and I, it's Monday night, 6:30 p.m., and we're on one of our coaching calls. And he says, so Jennifer, today I'm going to teach you how to talk to your heart. I literally said, go fuck yourself. I'm going to fire you by the end of this call. Like, people don't understand what a dick I was. He literally, so Julian changed my life. So I wouldn't have sold the first company without Julian. He was instrumental. That's why he and I were building this new company together. And I just remember when Julian, that these are the sort of emails, and this will all be in the book, but these are the sort of emails I used to send out, Jerome. It's mortifying to actually say this, but I literally once sent an email that was all caps, all in the subject line. Are you all a bunch of fucking morons? Why are you not working harder, faster, smart? People don't believe me what an asshole I used to be. And so Julian, God bless him, for one whole year, Jerome, he proofread any important emails. He'd be like, and he was so magnanimous about it. He'd be like, Jen, why don't we soften the tone on this email? So it took me literally probably a decade of working with Julian and then having many wonderful mentors come into my life. So around when I turned 30, then the clouds parted and the sun began to shine, and I began to be more receptive to coaches and teachers. And now I don't live my life without it. One of my current teachers, Jocelyn Herman Saccio, is amazing. She's been life changing for me as well. And I certainly wouldn't be where I am today without all my teachers and mentors.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So that's a piece that I think a lot of people miss because they're trying to figure out how to go to that next level, and they're trying to brute force it. They're trying to impose their will on things. And I know we'll come back to that. I want to go back to something that you talked about. And I haven't actually had conversations with people who have been focused on it on this podcast. And so I'm very curious, and we haven't talked about it. So I think we're going to be aligned. But I want to ask you, you talked about purpose, self, and others. And I think you called it a golden triangle. What does purpose actually mean? Because it seems like this very esoteric woo woo word. Then people are like, oh, I got to find my purpose. But I don't actually hear people using an operational definition.
And I will give you my best interpretation of what it means to me. And I think it is a very subjective experience of purpose. One person's purpose might be raising a family, another person might be, giving charitably and helping and donating time, money, or energy. Another person's purpose might be building a company like Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos. And so the purpose for me is, what is the carrot that gets you out of bed? What is it that if you had magic fairy dust, you could spend the rest of life doing it and never quite being fulfilled? And so for me, mine is connection and contribution. And it goes back to that fairy godmother of human connection, is I truly, from the bottom of my soul, Jerome, wish I could connect every human being deeply to themselves, to help every individual remember the spark of light in themselves. And then once they do that, to look for and reflect it to others who have forgotten it. And so for me, it's clear as day. This only really came to me and culminated in the last year or so between working with my business coach, working with my mentors, doing a lot of work with healers and intuitives, and spending time in contemplation and reflection. But it's just, I know it like breathing. It's like you just know how to breathe. That's to me what purpose is. And everybody is different. And it starts with a vision. It's like, what's your vision? If you could do anything, and it doesn't have to be big or small, it's whatever matters to you. Years ago, I was in a personal development class in Monterey with 100 thought leaders, and we would meet up every 6 weeks in Monterey, California. And I remember the guy facilitating the discussion said, I want you to turn to your partner, look them in the eyes, and ask them, what matters to you? And that, for me, Jerome, is a really great catalyst and flashlight to guide you to what your purpose is. Just look over, in this new year, look into the eyes of a loved one, a friend, a colleague, and just pause and ask that person, what matters to you? What lights you up? And I think not a lot of us spend time in that inquiry.
This is perfect. So the way that we have boiled down defining purpose, it's people and a problem. And you said connection and contribution, right?
Yeah.
And so we both have our alliterations going, but people and a problem. And it's like, well, who are you connected to? Who do you want to help? And then what problem do you want to help solve, or how do you want to contribute to their lives? I watch so many people go look for those things outside of themselves. And I just think it's a fool's errand. It's not out there, it's in there. But so many people are uncomfortable with going inside. I think I had a friend say, hey, you've never seen yourself. And I was like, you're crazy, man. Like, just look at a mirror or pull out your camera. It's like, no, you've never seen yourself with your own eyes. Ooh. But I think you can feel all of the things and you actually can think all the thoughts. And I just question whether or not those things are more valuable. And that's why those are the things that we could actually experience because we can't look upon our face with our own eyes.
Beautiful.
You, so it's very interesting to hear your journey. You said over a decade you were changed by one particular coach. I actually had one client that stayed with me for 10 years. The journey that you guys went on, I think it wouldn't be amiss by saying, hey, it was life changing. When you went through your exit, how long did you run that company? Was it a decade? Was it
It
more
was
than a
7 years.
decade?
It was
7.
7 years. Yeah.
Okay. And so that is a little short for what we typically see when people exit. But when you sold it, and it may be more intense because it started out with you and it was your namesake. What happened when you separated from the company? Like, did you feel a ripping of your identity?
It was so easy and seamless and effortless. I have to say, the strangest, most beautiful thing happened for me is here I was, I'd built the company, and originally, of course, you have golden handcuffs and you have a set amount of years that you need to run the company, host the exit, right? And originally, which I would never recommend to anybody, I signed something outrageous, like a 5 year agreement of like continuing to run the company. Anybody listening out there, 2 years max, really. And so I signed this agreement. We merge our team, we bring them into the acquiring company, and a series of serendipities preceded that. So the CEO of the subsidiary of the larger parent company that bought us, he wound up bailing on the company about 7 months post into our acquisition. So literally one day, I'm about to fly to New York to see him and the COO to talk about the plans for the next year. I think it was like November of 2018. And the CEO of the subsidiary that bought us sends an email to the whole company. Die, bitches, die. I hate you all. I'm taking half the company with me. You cannot make this up. It was hilarious. And so this happens. The CEO is like, screw that asshole. You and I are now running this company. Let's go somewhere else for dinner. So that then shifted my role. Now here all of a sudden I'm in a role that's kind of more global across the whole company, not just running our division out of California that they had acquired. So this all happens. Then a series of different things happened that all led on November 1st of 2019 to me being able to exit the company 3 years early that my second in command, our VP, head of the company, who had been with me almost since day one, she and the team took it over. They seamlessly took it over. They didn't even need me. I had a special thing in my contract where I had to be available anywhere in the world to consult 10 hours a week. November 1st of 2019, I changed contracts, moved into a consulting role. I got offered a TV hosting gig on Awake TV, which was a brand new network. And I got offered to co-moderate this panel with Deepak Chopra and Don Hoffman with my old alma mater, UC Irvine, in early January of 2020. That led to me reaching out to Deepak and Don Hoffman and saying, hey, I saved you a spot on my new show. Now, this was a stretch. Show was a stretch. It's like an internet thing that didn't even really exist. And I get a call from Deepak's people. I don't even know. I've never met him, never read one of his books except this first one. And his old assistant and chief of staff at the time, Carolyn, calls me and she's like, okay, Jennifer, Deepak's going to meet you in studio and he wants this sort of a car to pick him up. And I'm like, I don't have a studio. It's hilarious. I had to call a friend of mine at the Kabbalah Center, David Guillaume. I'm like, David, help. I need a studio prop for like this thing with Deepak. And that then wound up becoming a 17-part series. And out of that, Deepak and I wound up doing 100,000 plus person meditation right before COVID started peaking. And I just got thrust into this whole other world of consciousness and spirituality. And that led me to a lot of the wonderful quantum physicists and neuroscientists I now consider friends.
That's wild.
It was wild. It was so weird and wonderful and weird.
So I'm fanning out because, like, when I got exposed to Kabbalah, it was David. And, like,
Oh,
I've
I'd
never
love to.
talked to him, I've never met him, right? But I see him on Instagram consistently, and I've been through some of the recorded classes that he's done. And so it's like, oh, yeah, I called David, and then we used the thing. I was like, is
Well,
this
I have to
real?
tell you, here's a crazy story about David. In fact, he and I were just texting about it the other day. So on the day that I recorded in studio at the Kabbalah Center, it was before David became, so this was like, what, 2020? So probably 5 years ago. before David had blown up as big as he was popular in the Kabbalah Center, but not well known globally yet. So David's there to meet me in the studio to be sure Deepak's set up. And I will always remember I went to kind of the main hall in the Kabbalah Center in LA, and I'm talking to David. I'm like, David, Deepak's about to arrive. Do you want to meet him? And he said, no, Jen, now is not the right time. I'm going to wait for the divine time for Deepak and I to meet. So crazy story. I reconnect, like here we are 5 years later, I reconnect David and Deepak. They actually share the same publicist. Shout out to Megan Former. And so I say, oh, we got to get them to collaborate to do something. So fast forward about 3 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, Deepak and David did a co-facilitated webinar with tens of thousands of people around the world. And as it's happening, right afterwards, I texted David. I was like, do you remember that time when I offered to introduce you to Deepak and you said no, you had to wait for a better time? He said, absolutely. I was just telling someone that story.
This is crazy. So, all right. You have to connect the dots for me, right? So, let me tell you what the frame that I view this situation through normally and why yours is different. So, typically, people will either do one or two things. They'll sell their company and walk away, and usually they exit into a void because they haven't done any personal planning. And that, to me, is the best of a worst case scenario. You get the liquidity event, but you lose your identity among many other things. The other side of this is they work for the mothership. And many people I know experience that as purgatory, right? Like they haven't had a boss for however long. Now
Agreed.
they're requesting time off. They are doing expense reports when they didn't have to before. Like it is a whole thing where, that's wild. Entrepreneur is now an employee, and most oftentimes they hate it. So I agree totally on not agreeing to a 5-year deal. And I usually tell people they're going to get tired about 6 months in if they can last that long.
Right.
So you go in, the role gets elevated. I imagine composition changes or compensation changes a bit, and whatever earnout you had for staying, you had control over it, which I think is something that isn't usually within the realm of the person that is working as an employee that was an entrepreneur. So you go through that, but this kind of series of events that led to you really walking in this connection and contribution space, I don't think most people have that facilitated or orchestrated for them, and they spin their wheels a lot. And so, how did you get, was it your coach, or how did you get the clarity on contribution and connection being your deal?
That was two parts, actually. One part is David Guillaume. So I was very lucky. So the year I sold my company in 2018 was a 1, 2, 3 punch. I sold the company, got diagnosed as being high functioning on the spectrum, and went through a divorce all in that year. It was like 1, 2, 3. And David was my mentor and coach at that time. And so I was steeped in Kabbalistic principles about sharing. One of the biggest tenets of Kabbalah is just be like the light and share and be of service and source. So David was the one who first sparked that idea of me of connection, contribution, of being of service, being like the light, right? And then about a year and a half ago, I started working with my business coach, Jocelyn Herman Sacchio. And it's funny, you can actually find a podcast. I put Jocelyn and David together right before he blew up last year. And Jocelyn has a podcast called Unmessable With. So she's become a dear friend. She actually facilitated my landmark worldwide class that I did with my husband, my now husband, back in February 2020, and we became just immediate friends. And she was always kind of mentoring me on the side. And so this year I started working with her really directly. And she was one who inspired in me to really formulate my big dream and my vision. So the big dream is that everybody has a deep connected relationship to themselves, others, and their purpose. And then the vision is connection, contribution.
Wow. And so, did you didn't have that before you left your role with the company
Yes
that
and
acquired
no.
you?
I've been deeply steeped in spiritual work for about 20 years now. When I figured out I was an asshole in my early 20s and then started developing a arsenal of tools in my tool belt, many things that I started to learn really helped me to be grounded in the exit and to be able to have the tools and resources. So between studying with David at the Kabbalah Center, studying Michael Beckwith, having Julian as my business coach, having Landmark and those tenants, It's all about the tools. I think that the reason most of us fail is a lack of a proper tool belt. And one of my favorite analogies I like to use, Jerome, is Batman. Most people don't think of Batman as the only one who's not superhuman. You look at a lot of the other superheroes, you look at Spider-Man, Superman, they're all superhuman, right? But Batman's just an ordinary man. What makes him a superhero is his super tool belt. And that is my intention for the executives and CEOs I work with and coach, is to give them super tools in their super tool belt. So when they find themselves falling off a metaphorical or proverbial cliff, it could be a breakup, issue with a business partner, what tool are you going to use to rightly ground yourself?
So, yeah, this is so good because then that makes it available to everybody. You don't have to have a unique and special gift or talent in order to achieve the goals or achieve what's been placed on your heart. Although I think everybody has a unique set of experiences that have led them to the space so that they are able to do the thing. Being able to build skills is about skill building and not necessarily the talent that you're gifted from God.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. It's about these tools that are available for us to pick and choose from for anything. We all need tools to overcome our limiting beliefs, to overcome our fears, to embrace and dance with them. That was one of my favorite teachings that David taught me when we studied together, is to ask your fears every day. Fear of failing at building my company. What do you want this to teach me? In fact, just moments before we went on to record this, I wrote an article on Substack and I had been resisting. I write all the time. I've written books, I've written white papers, but I had this story that writing a book or writing on Substack was so deep, and those are the best writers. And I'm not a good enough writer to write on Substack. So I just posted this article about on writing. And I think I wrote something, I did a play on Shakespeare, to write or not to write, that is the question. Because, we all have these hindrances and limiting beliefs and fears. Oh, am I good enough writer? Am I a good enough wife or business partner, mother, father, sister, brother? And the more that we can take our magnifying glass and just sit with and examine our fears and talk to them, learn from them, that's what makes us unstoppable and superhuman in our own way.
Good enough is a very interesting concept. I watch a lot of people say, "Oh, you should be humble." And I ask pretty pointedly, like, "Why would you want to be humble?" And it's always a pearl clutching moment. You're like, "Huh, everybody teaches you to be humble." I was like, "Yeah, but we only get what we feel like we deserve." And so when you're humble, you often feel like you don't deserve anything. Now, I get it. Like, being grateful for everything is helpful. But if you don't feel like you deserve it, then how would you ever get it? And so I think you'll have an interesting perspective on that concept. And I just like to offer that out there as a softball for you to crush.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the humble thing, because are you familiar with Louise Hay's work? She's prolific founder. Oh my gosh. So Louise Hay was a pioneer in all the work that Deepak and Joe Dispenza and everybody perpetuates now. And she was into this 50, 60, 70 years ago. She's since passed. And she was the progenitor of Hay House, which is just recently, I think, got acquired by Penguin, if I'm not mistaken. And Louise Hay had this thing called You Can Heal Your Life. And it's a list of every symptom that you might ever go through, from cancer to alcoholism to bulimia to backache to neck pain, right? And what the limiting belief is. So, why do I bring this up around humble? It's funny because that is one of my greatest opportunities for growth. I was taught from when I was very young to be confident and assertive and, go out there and conquer the world. When I was 5 years old, I had a general friend of my grandfather's like pinch my cheek and say, "Sweetheart, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "First woman president of the United States." Now, where my 5-year-old mind came up with that, I think I just knew it was like an impossibility. So I was like, just bring it, right? So, all that said, when you look at this idea of humble and modest in Louise Hay's framework, she says if you have knee pain, it's because it's related to pride. And so, what's hilarious is me, my mom, my grandma, everybody on our maternal side of my mom's family has had right knee pain. So, I'm constantly using a particular technique to rewire my beliefs. And I do work on I'm humble and modest because I think you can actually hold both at the same time. I think pride is dangerous, and so confidence would be the antidote to pride. So can you be confident? And even one of my dear friends and mentors, Arthur Samuel Joseph, talks about hubris and how he's coached Tony Robbins, Pierce Brosnan, Sean Connery, some of the top athletes in the world like Dwayne Wade. And he said, hubris is just owning, knowing the power and the gift that you are to the world, but it's a very tight rope and line that you're walking between that and pride. And pride is the danger that causes the knee pain, according to Louise Hay.
Wow. Wow. Bend the knee.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. Like you've alluded to it, but like what is getting you out of bed as you describe passion? What's getting you out of bed now?
So right now, what I'm most lit up about is I have a group of 311 entrepreneurs I run around the world called the Jen Hill Tribe that's been extraordinary and amazing, and I love them. We're thought leaders, billionaires, best-selling authors, podcasters, and we all come together and help each other. Our secret name board is the Love Club. We're all part of like a secret love club to help humanity. So I love our group of people because it's like having a global family and network of friends that all uplifts and supports one another. So on the one hand, I love that. On the other hand, I'm going into a year very passionate about writing, as I have the Recovering Asshole book coming out next year. It's really meant to be a whole series of things. It's going to be classes, how not to be a dick in business, how not to be a dick in life, all these different things. I even have something, if anybody wants to know what I lovingly call my anti-asshole prayer, you can literally go to antiassholeprayer.com. And that's one of my secrets of creating a great tribe and network around you is a little mantra I say every day. So that'll take you to a place that you can sign up and get a list of my 21 favorite mantras that I use every day. So as I look into 2026, I'm intending we'll still sell the company. It was kind of a crazy story. We had an offer to buy our company the day my co-founder died, so October 28th of 2025. Happiest day. My co-founder and I had been working for months on getting an acquisition over the line. We got the offer the day he died. He died that night, and it was crazy. So we're now figuring out what do we do with the tech company we've been running in the midst of all this. So if anybody out there is looking to buy a tech company, it is for sale.
Oh my gosh. That is heartbreaking.
It is. It was absolutely. But the good news is he died. It was the happiest day of his life. His wife, all his friends, he was literally playing the guitar and having beer with friends. They went inside, then he came back out and he's dead on the floor.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry to hear that.
It's okay.
So you help, you threw it out there. It's like, hey, it's billionaires, it's entrepreneurs, it's thought leaders, just kind of a group, a community of people who are doing life together. And the mission is, it sounds like, but I'm not sure, to make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's literally the purpose of it. Anybody can go to jenhilltribe.com and find out more. I've had two of our tribe members in the last 2 weeks tell me it's changed their lives. They're literally one woman, her whole life had never spoken on stages. She's gotten 2 or 3 speaking gig offers in the last 6 months since doing all the work on this. Another woman, I didn't even know this, she was interviewing me on her podcast. And she said, Jen, you changed my life. I met my new best friend, my new business partner, my therapist out of the group. It's, you know how a lot of people spend our whole lives, Jerome, looking for our tribe, looking for our people, like who are the people you want to play with? So I work with those people in terms of the tribe, and we do monthly calls and meetings around the world and things like that. But then simultaneously, those are also pretty much anybody I coach who's high level. I do very high level coaching for CEOs and executives and business owners. And all my coaching clients are in there too. So then they have a network and a system, a support system of people to help them.
All right. So it's probably going to feel like a hard right, but I think you'll be able to tie it in. Why don't you live in the US anymore? Like, what drew you across the pond? Because you talked about London, you're not there anymore. You talked about California, like, you talked about New York a little bit, but you're outside the US now. And I always find it fascinating when people find a way to live outside the US because I think we do a great job of marketing this as the only place that is civil and that you can live. So, what drew you away?
It was serendipity. So in 2019, as I mentioned, November 1st, 2019, I no longer had to run the company that we had just sold. I also was now offered this TV hosting gig and a myriad of other things. So on, I think it was going to be on February 25th of 2020, before COVID peaked and got crazy. My husband and I were just dating at the time, and we had booked a year of travel. We had literally booked and paid for a month in Italy, a month in Bali, a month in South Africa, a month in the south of France. It was all booked and paid for. Our apartments were packed up. Everything was done, packed and done. And then through a series of serendipities, I wound up coming to Lisbon instead of London on the first leg of the trip, and just fell in love with Lisbon, Portugal. I mean, it was like love at first sight when I came here, which is ironic because I'm part Portuguese on my dad's side, but I had never been to Portugal. So I come here, I fall in love. I continue with my trip, find myself in Paris. And I remember it was March 12th of 2020, where I'm in Paris. I wake up to 70 text messages, get out of Paris, get to an English speaking country, borders are being shut down. It was like everybody, it was when Trump had closed the borders and all of that stuff happened. So fast forward, this all happens. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with my life, with the world? So I wind up moving to London just to be in an English speaking country in the height of COVID. Wound up moving back to Paris because it's Paris and j'adore Paris. So wound up moving back to Paris, and then eventually came back to Lisbon and wound up living in Lisbon most of the last 5 years because I just love it here. So I travel a lot. This year, I think I went to 15 countries and 14 states and 9 international trips. But, you know, the world is a very small place.
It's funny you say that because it just feels so big. We went to Singapore last year. We stopped in Dubai and we spent time in Singapore and Sri Lanka, and it just seems so far away.
Everybody said that. So a friend of mine who was speaking, I was keynoting in Bali a couple months ago, and I literally flew 30 hours there and 30 hours back and had an 11-person dinner party I was hosting the day I got back. And it was just to give this speech and come back, right? And one of my other friends who was flying from Austin, Texas, he's like, Jen, it's so hard. How are you flying halfway around the world? And you're only good. I was like, listen, JP, this is the reason why most people have pain, because we tell ourselves it's hard. I stopped living in space and time about a year ago. We know, according to quantum physics, you can't measure things below the Planck scale. Therefore, I'm going to get nerdy with you guys for a second here. But if you can't measure things below the Planck scale, that means space-time as we know it, which everybody thought was fundamental to the universe up until about 20 years ago, is not fundamental. But no scientist has been able to come up with something to replace it as. So it was about a year ago that I just started treating space and time as figurative, not literal, and it's easy. And I can hop on a plane. I literally landed after 30 hours, hosted an 11-person dinner party, and it was easy.
It's easy. It's all in how we look at it, right? It's the
Yeah,
framing.
That's our perspective.
this is a lot of the work I do is around neuroscience. It's around neuroscience, understanding our perspective and choosing. I was just had a magazine, Retreat Boss, write an article that people can find if they Google my name and Retreat Boss. And in it, I talk about the 3 lenses that we see ourselves in the world through. So step 1, Jerome, is can we notice that we have a lens, over it's hard to travel 30 hours. It's a lens over our loved ones, our family members, our colleagues. So number 1, can you notice that there is a lens? Number 2, could you choose a different lens and choose to apply that lens in the same way we apply a filter over our photos on Instagram? What if you could apply a filter on how you see yourself and your loved ones or your business? And finally, number 3 is what if you could live a no filter, no lens life? And that's the goal. I think that's enlightenment, where we all strive to, is to live in a world without lenses.
What would that look like? No filter, no lens. Because I mean, that means no biases. That means no judgment, I think.
I have moments I've gotten there. I'm not 100% there all the time, Jerome, because I'm human, right? I'm hungry, angry, tired from time to time. But if I've slept and eaten well enough, there's a story I shared in one of the last keynotes that I gave when I was in Bali of a man who came to my house. I didn't know him. He was just referred by a friend, and I'm always meeting random strangers around the world. So he sits down, and I notice I'm falling into the trap of judgment, or what I call being a judgy bunny. And he starts bragging about this person and that person he knows. And because I had spent the time I normally spend in meditation, I had slept well, my higher consciousness came in and said, you're judging him for name dropping because you do that and you haven't been willing to acknowledge that in yourself. And I was like, what? Wow, universe, that hurts. You cut me real deep, Shrek, but then I could see it was true. So we proceeded to sit down and have a cup of tea on the terrace. And I was able to drop the lens of that judgment that I had just been applying moments before and listen while adding nothing. And listening at the same time, then my higher self said, listen for his spark of light. And that's one of my favorite filters to apply, is to listen for the spark of light. And then as that happened, he started to share a story of something he went through and a loved one, and it brought us very close together. And we both wound up crying on the terrace together. It was amazing. But that was all noticing the filter, applying a different filter, and then eventually getting to no filter.
Wow. I love that. Because then like, it's funny because you dropped, what did you say? I stopped living in time and space about a year ago.
Yeah.
And then you just moved on past that because like there was no pause, there was no like, did you guys get that? It's kind of a big deal when you leave the 3D, right? Like most
It's
people,
only a big deal because people think it's a big deal. I mean, we're literally all 5D anyways. We're just down here having a human experience in what I call soul school. There was a book I read years ago called Adventures of the Soul Jet by James Van Praagh. And the minute I read it, it resonated so deeply. It's like, imagine Jerome and Jennifer choose our curriculum. We're like, ooh, I'd love some abandonment. Ooh, how about some rejection? Ooh, why don't you throw in a little bit of judgment and anger and money issues? Oh, that'll be fun. I'm going to take this curriculum this time. And so when we can start to see it like this, and again, remove the lens, remove the filter, then all of a sudden you can see everything for what it is.
you can see it for what it is. I think that's a perfect way to end the episode because I watch so many people make up a story that isn't. They create drama, they create pain, they create heartache, and they're offended over things that just aren't. They've added meaning that wasn't actually there. You talked about, what'd you say? You said listening without adding anything, just being present, holding space. And I wonder what the world actually looks like if we weren't all offended and we weren't all upset because somebody saw things differently than how we saw them, or they didn't do it the way that we wanted to do them, or they didn't do it in the time that we decided that they should do it. I just wonder how much more peace we might have and how much more love we might be able to experience if we lived in that space. So thank you for that final nugget. If I mean, we've talked about a few different things. You talked about the book. You've talked about the J Hill tribe. You've talked about some of your high level coaching. If folks want to learn more or get connected with you, what's the best way to do that?
Thank you so much, Jerome. I appreciate you and your audience and your listening today. If people want to connect, I would say a couple of the places that you can go to do so is my website, jenniferkhill.com. So Jennifer K as in kite, HILL.com. That'll allow you, if you click the contact us button, that'll allow you to email me. You can also go to jenhilltribe.com, and that'll give you information on the tribe in case it's something that interests you. Join the Love Club / the tribe. And you can also go to antiassholeprayer.com. That'll give you free access to my 21 morning mantras, including the anti-asshole prayer, and we'll keep you updated when the book comes out next year.
I hope you'll come back and we can talk about that.
Oh, I would love that, my friend.
Oh my gosh. This has been such a fulfilling episode. You know, the first time I sat down with Jen, the energy that I got was, hey, everything's going to be okay. That is so rare. And, typically I would do this on the front side of the episode, but I knew that she was going to be captivating and hold you guys here for the entire thing. And so I just want to let you know that everything's going to be okay. And if you are questioning that, it's probably because you need to change your lens. Jen, this was so good. Thank you so much for creating space for us and sharing the journey that you've been on and the knowledge that you've gained from that because, you've applied those things and that wisdom, I believe, is helping transform the world.
Thank you, Jerome. It's my privilege and my honor.
To our listeners, your dreams should be real. We'll catch you on the next episode.